One simple question on live air just exposed how Cleveland media really moves. And it wasn't even about football. They asked if the Browns would be better off with Kyler Murray or Shedeur Sanders. And the moment G. Bush answered, you could feel the trap snap shut. Because those comparisons aren't made to inform you, they're made to split the fan base, light up the comment section, and keep the QB conversation toxic all offseason. And G. Bush wasn't having it. He didn't just pick a side. He called out the entire playbook behind these stories, warning fans about rage bait, headlines designed to make you mad on purpose, fake trade targets, ridiculous cut rumors, and non-stop quarterback debates that magically appear every time the team needs a distraction. So if you felt like Browns coverage has turned into a setup, you're not imagining it. The real question is who benefits from keeping fans angry. That Kyler Murray versus Shedeur Sanders question sounds like normal sports talk at first, until you listen to how it's framed. They didn't ask, who would you rather build with long term? They didn't ask, who fits a system better? They asked the most loaded version possible, who gives you a better chance to win asterisk right now today. That wording matters because it forces an unfair comparison on purpose. Kyler is a proven NFL quarterback with years of real snaps, real wins, real losses, real tape against real defenses. Shedeur, whether you love him or not, is still a projected NFL guy in the public conversation. So when you ask today, you're not asking a football question. You're asking a question designed to embarrass somebody into picking the safe answer, or make them look crazy for taking the other side. That's how rage bait works. It puts a person in a corner and lets the audience do the rest. And notice what happens next. The room instantly turns it into a scoreboard. That's ludicrous. That's wrong. Now it's not a debate, it's a pylon. The point isn't to explore the idea. The point is to create a clip where somebody gets laughed at, the comments explode, and everyone leaves feeling like they won something. Then they escalate it by dragging G. Bush into it on the spot. They don't let him answer on his own platform with his own context. They call him live, put him on speaker, and make it a moment. That's not random, that's content engineering. Because if G. Bush answers one way at C, even Cleveland media thinks Shedeur is the guy. If he answers the other way, it becomes C. Shedeur fans are delusional. Either outcome produces heat. In the clip, G. Bush keeps it blunt. He says he's not a Kyler Murray fan and he's going with Sanders. And you can already predict what happens after that. People don't hear the full reasoning. They don't stop to ask what he means by fan, or what traits he values, or whether he's talking about ceiling, leadership, or toughness. They hear the name, pick a side, and go to war in the replies. That's the trap. One short answer becomes a personality test for the audience. Kyler represents one kind of quarterback conversation. NFL resume, arm talent, mobility. We've seen it. Shedeur represents a totally different conversation. Projection, upside, leadership, and all the baggage that comes with being Coach Prime's son. The media knows those two worlds don't mix cleanly, which is exactly why the comparison generates instant friction. And here's the sneaky part. Once the fan base is arguing Kyler versus Shedeur, they're not arguing about the stuff that actually fixes a team. They're not talking offensive line. They're not talking receiver separation. They're not talking scheme, coaching, or development. They're talking in memes and slogans. That's way easier to monetize than real analysis. So when people ask why Browns coverage feels exhausting, this is why. The questions are framed to produce anger, not clarity. And the moment you respond emotionally, the cycle keeps going. But what makes this clip different is what G. Bush did after the moment passed, because he didn't just let it be another viral argument. He turned around and warned everyone that the entire offseason is going to be filled with setups like this. And once you see his examples, it gets hard to unsee the pattern. The reason G. Bush's response hit so hard isn't just because he picked Sanders over Kyler. It's what he said right after. Don't fall for the setup. Because according to him, a lot of Cleveland coverage isn't built to inform Browns fans anymore. It's built to agitate them, to keep them arguing, to keep them refreshing their feeds. And the wild part is, once you notice it, you start seeing the same formula everywhere. He basically calls it out like this: there's no real allegiance in this market. Not to the team, not to the players, and definitely not to the fans. The loyalty is to attention, and attention comes from conflict. If the Browns are quiet for a day, someone has to manufacture a reason for you to feel something, usually irritation. That's why he mocks the idea that media only does this because Shedeur fans are unrealistic or because one player is too polarizing. He's saying that's a convenient excuse, a cover story, like, "We're not stirring the pot, you guys are just too emotional." And then he calls it what it is: liars. And this is where his warning gets useful, because he's not just ranting, he's teaching a pattern. Step 1, take a sensitive topic: quarterbacks, contracts, cut candidates, team culture, and frame it in the most inflammatory way possible. Not the most accurate way, the most clickable way. Step 2, attach it to a recognizable name, a player fans actually care about. That's how you guarantee reactions. It doesn't matter if the take is weak. The name does the heavy lifting. Step 3, pretend it's analysis. Use just enough cap talk, or sources say language, so it sounds official to casual fans who don't have time to dig deeper. And step 4 is the most important part. When fans push back, you label them zealots or delusional, so the audience gets blamed for reacting to the fire you set. G. Bush's point is that this isn't a one-off. It's a cycle, and Cleveland is especially vulnerable to it because quarterback talk is the easiest emotional button to press in that city. Browns fans have been dragged through so many QB eras that the media doesn't even need to exaggerate much. They just have to poke the scar and watch what happens. That's why he's warning people now in the offseason, when storylines are cheap and the content demand is high. Because this is the season where what if becomes it's being reported, and then it's trending, and then suddenly a made-up angle feels like reality. And what makes his warning even more brutal is who he's aiming it at. Not just the national hot take artists, but the local ecosystem too. The people who get credentials and microphones without, in his words, ever sounding like they've really watched the games they're talking about. So if you're a Browns fan, the message is simple. Stop letting your emotions get rented out for free. Stop rewarding the headlines that are obviously designed to irritate you. Because every time you bite, you teach them what to post next. And the next example he pulls up is exactly how this works in practice. Because it's not even about quarterbacks at first. It's about a star player getting tossed into a cut candidate headline. And the logic behind it is so flimsy, it almost feels disrespectful on purpose. G. Bush's best example of rage bait wasn't even a quarterback debate. It was a headline designed to make Browns fans instantly tense. Denzel Ward as a potential cut candidate. And if you're a Cleveland fan, you already know why that's such an effective button to press. Ward isn't just a player. He's one of the few guys on that roster who's been consistently associated with real, high-end talent. So the second somebody floats cut candidate, it triggers the exact reaction the headline was built for. Panic, anger, finger-pointing, and 1,000 replies debating money like everyone suddenly became a cap expert overnight. That's the trick. You don't even need a strong argument. You just need the right name. G. Bush's point was that the analysis behind a lot of these posts isn't analysis at all. It's a vibe. It's somebody saying, he's not as elite as he once was, and sprinkling in the word money, like that automatically makes the take smart. But when you actually slow down and think about it, cutting a proven corner in his primish years isn't a casual decision. It's not something you toss into an article because you needed content on a Tuesday. And financially, these stories often leave out the one detail that matters most. Cutting a big-name player doesn't always free up the clean money fans assume it does. Depending on how a contract is structured, Cutting a player can create a brutal dead money hit or force you into moves that don't actually improve the team. In other words, the headline sells a fantasy. Get rid of him, fix the cap, without doing the hard part, which is explaining whether the move is even logical. That's why G. Bush went off about credentials and microphones. His frustration wasn't just, "Don't talk about my guy." It was deeper. Why are people who clearly aren't watching the film or don't understand basic roster-building consequences guiding the conversation for an entire fan base? Because once a headline like that spreads, it becomes its own reality. Fans start arguing about Ward's value instead of the actual defensive plan. They start debating whether he washed instead of what the scheme asks him to do. And the loudest voices win, not the most accurate ones. That's how a star's reputation gets quietly chipped away without anything real changing on Sundays. And that's the part that feels intentional. When you keep tossing respected players into cut rumors, you keep the fan base in a constant state of distrust. Distrust of the front office, distrust of the locker room, distrust of the future. It's emotional debt, and it keeps people clicking because they're always trying to protect something. G. Bush is basically saying, don't let them do it to you. Not with Ward, not with any key player. If the headline is extreme and the evidence is thin, it's probably not information, it's engagement farming. And once he makes that point, he goes even harder, because the next wave of rage bait is worse than cut candidate talk. It's the impossible trade rumor, the kind that's so unrealistic it should die instantly, but somehow still trends. After the Denzel Ward example, G. Bush pivots to something even more revealing. The impossible rumor that somehow keeps getting oxygen, C.J. Stroud as a potential target. And this is where rage bait goes from lazy to almost comedic, because it relies on one simple fact. A huge percentage of fans react to the name before they react to the logic. C.J. Stroud is the kind of quarterback every team would want. That's exactly why the rumor works. The headline hits your brain like a dopamine shot. Imagine the Browns landing a young star. Then before you even finish the thought, you're either excited or furious, and either emotion drives engagement. But G. Bush does what most media pieces don't. He asks the question that kills the whole thing instantly. With what picks? With what money? That's the part you rarely see in the headline because it's not as fun as the fantasy. It's not as shareable as Brown should inquire. But it's the only part that matters. Any serious trade for a franchise quarterback costs a king's ransom. Draft picks, cap planning, roster sacrifices. And if your own situation is complicated, you don't just inquire like you're shopping for a used car. That's why G. Bush treats it like an insult to the audience's intelligence. Because rumors like this aren't built to be true, they're built to keep the debate machine running. And the most dangerous part is how these fantasy rumors stack on top of each other. Today it's Stroud. Tomorrow it's another star. The day after that it's should they call about. And suddenly you're in a loop where the Browns are interested in every quarterback on earth except the ones actually in the building. That creates a constant sense of instability, which is perfect for content. Because if the Browns feel stable, the media loses one of its easiest sources of daily drama. Stability doesn't trend, chaos does. And you can hear the deeper accusation in what G. Bush is saying. These pieces aren't meant to help fans understand what the team should do. They're meant to make fans feel like the team is always one move away from greatness and one move away from disaster. It keeps you emotionally invested in the rumor mill instead of the reality on the field. He also points out another trick. They use big-name analysts and draft gurus to make it sound legitimate. Todd McShay says, "An insider thinks that name-dropping creates authority without accountability. If the rumor dies, nobody pays for it. They just move on to the next click." That's why G. Bush calls it Part 2, Part 3, Part 4 of the setup. Because once the fan base starts chasing unrealistic quarterback fantasies, the real problems get ignored. like offensive line play, receiver room consistency, and the boring work that actually makes a quarterback succeed. And here's the sharpest point. If your fan base is constantly arguing about impossible trades, it becomes easier for the team and the media ecosystem to avoid hard conversations about development, roster building, and accountability. So the Stroud rumor isn't just silly. It's useful. It's a smoke cloud. It's something everybody can scream about while nothing changes. But according to G. Bush, the nastiest version of this tactic isn't the fantasy trades. It's what happens when they start pitting groups of fans against each other, turning the quarterback room into a civil war for clicks. And that's where the divide and conquer part comes in. The most profitable rumor isn't a fake trade target, it's a feud. Because once you get fans arguing with each other, the media doesn't even have to report anymore. They just sit back and collect clicks while the fan base does the work for them. And that's exactly what G. Bush was warning about when he brought up the Browns quarterback conversation turning into a divide and conquer operation. Look at how the setup works. First, you paint the QB room like it's a ticking time bomb. You imply people don't like each other. You hint that somebody's jealous. You throw out vague lines like, they don't really rock with him, or the relationship isn't good, with no real sourcing. And the best part for the headline writers, they don't even have to prove it, they just have to suggest it. Then comes the next move. You force fans to pick a side. If the topic is Deshaun Watson, that's already a guaranteed fault line, because accusations surfaced in the past and a lot of fans have strong feelings about him one way or the other. That's real-life baggage, and it makes reactions louder. If the topic shifts to Shedeur Sanders, you get another split instantly. People who love the confidence and people who can't stand it. So the media can bounce between those two names like a pinball machine and keep the audience permanently irritated. And G. Bush's accusation is colder than it sounds. He's basically saying some of these outlets don't truly want clarity at quarterback, because clarity ends the content cycle. If a QB becomes the guy, the daily drama shrinks. You can't farm the same arguments forever if the team builds stability. That's why he pointed out how the media will act like it's anybody but Shedeur, or anybody but Watson, depending on the day and the storyline they need. The names change, but the tactic stays the same. Make it feel like there's always a civil war inside the building, even when there is. He also called out another trick that doesn't get discussed enough: the messaging battle. When players and their families stay on message, it kills a lot of the fake drama before it spreads. That's what he meant when he said the divide and conquer stuff isn't going to work as easily if everybody's aligned and careful. Because the media needs loose quotes, messy vibes, and half-truths to build a narrative. If there's nothing to grab, they have to invent more, and that's when it gets obvious. And notice how quickly the conversation stops being football. Instead of discussing the actual evaluation, what the QB needs, what the scheme should be, what the offensive line has to look like, you're suddenly trapped in soap opera coverage. Who likes who? Who's mad? Who's taking shots? That's not analysis. That's reality TV disguised as sports talk. And here's the most important part of G. Bush's warning. Once fans get trained to consume football like drama, they start demanding drama. They start rewarding the worst headlines with the most attention. That's when the cycle becomes self-feeding, because media outlets can say, we're just giving the people what they want, even though they built the appetite in the first place. But that still isn't the full setup. Because after they split the fan base, the next step is to steer the conversation away from the boring fixes that would actually help any quarterback succeed. And that's where the off-season position group push comes in, advocating for everything except what makes the QB evaluation undeniable. This is where G. Bush's rage bait warning gets really sharp, because he's not just saying the media lies. He's saying the lies have a purpose. And the purpose is to keep the quarterback evaluation muddy. Because if a team actually surrounds its quarterback with competent protection and real weapons, you get answers fast. You stop guessing. You stop debating, is he the guy? Because the film starts screaming the truth. And once the truth is obvious, the rage bait market dries up. So according to G. Bush, the off-season setup goes like this. Advocate hard for position groups that are interesting to talk about, but don't actually solve the core problem. Make it sound smart. Make it sound balanced. And make sure the QB still has excuses built into the environment, because excuses keep the debate alive. That's why he calls out the constant pivoting. All season you'll hear, the offense is broken, the QB has no help, he needs weapons, he needs protection. Then the moment it's time to actually build around that idea, the conversation shifts into something like, well, what if we just run the clock out? Or what if we take a safety? Or what if we do something different? And the headline makes it sound like a bold, forward-thinking strategy when it's really just a way to avoid making the quarterback situation too clear. Because clarity is dangerous for the wrong people. Clarity means you can't hide behind "he had no help." Clarity means you can't keep floating hypotheticals about other quarterbacks. Clarity means you can't keep selling next year as an excuse. If the QB has protection and targets and still fails, it's obvious. If he has protection and targets and succeeds, it's also obvious. Either way, the debate ends. And G. Bush is suggesting that some parts of the media ecosystem don't want the debate to end. They want the constant cycle of maybe, because maybe keeps people clicking. He also hints at something even more cynical. If a quarterback starts showing real promise, then the machine has to stop him at all costs by shifting the discourse. Suddenly it becomes, he's not ready. He hasn't proven it. He needs competition. Or you start seeing comparisons that make him look smaller than he is, because the goal is to keep fans uncertain. And that's why he keeps coming back to the word setup. It's not one bad article, it's a sequence. First you plant doubt. Then you distract with a shiny idea. Then you pit fans against each other. Then you claim the fan base is the problem for reacting. And all the while, the actual football needs, the stuff that would give you a clean evaluation, gets pushed down the list. That's why he talks about offensive line and weapons like they're the ultimate narrative killer. Because once the Browns give their quarterback a fair environment, you can't rage bait with hypotheticals anymore. You can't spend every day asking, what if we had Kyler? What if we traded for Stroud? What if we drafted somebody else? Because the team will finally have enough structure to answer the only question that matters. Can this QB actually drive the car? And right when you think this is a Cleveland-specific issue, you start noticing the same exact behavior in national coverage too. The same type of exaggerated comparison, the same kind of upside fantasy, the same hot take engine. Which is why G. Bush's warning doesn't stop at local media. It extends to the entire sports content economy. And the receipt that proves it is the way analysts throw out wild quarterback comps like they're normal. If you think this rage bait problem lives only in Cleveland, the national media will cure you of that illusion in about 5 minutes. Because the same exact strategy, trigger first, explain later, runs the entire sports internet. And the receipt G. Bush pointed to is the kind of headline that sounds exciting until you actually think about what it's doing. A Bleacher Report analyst floating the idea that a coach could deploy Anthony Richardson in a Lamar Jackson-type role, and then hinting he could even become a more potent rushing threat. Now nobody saying Anthony Richardson can't be a dynamic player. He's a freak athlete. He's built like a linebacker and runs like a skilled guy. The problem is the way these comparisons get packaged. They're not built to help fans understand development. They're built to make fans react like it's already a reality. Because once you mention Lamar, you've hijacked the conversation. You're no longer talking about scheme fit, processing speed, accuracy, consistency, or the reps it takes to run an offense like that at an elite level. You're talking about the biggest name possible, which guarantees arguments. Half the audience hears it and thinks, yeah, unleash him. The other half hears it and thinks, that's disrespectful to Lamar. Either way, the post travels. And that's the point. The hot take economy isn't rewarded for being careful. It's rewarded for being loud. If an analyst says, Richardson could improve as a passer over time if the offense stabilizes, nobody shares it. If an analyst says, he could be used like Lamar, now you've got a war in the replies and every quote tweet is free promotion. This is exactly what G. Bush is trying to train fans to see. The story isn't always written to be true. It's written to be addictive. And once fans get addicted to these big-name comparisons, it bleeds back into local coverage. Now every quarterback is measured against the most extreme versions of success. Every prospect gets framed as the next somebody. Every vet is either washed or elite. There's no middle, no patience, no real timeline, just constant emotional whiplash. That's why Cleveland media can get away with the Kyler versus Shedeur trap. The audience has been conditioned by national takes to treat quarterback talk like a reality show. They want instant answers and instant rankings, even when football doesn't work like that. And here's the sneaky damage these comps do. They make development sound easy. They make it seem like you can just deploy a player into greatness, like the only thing missing was a coach having the courage to try it. But real QB development is messy. It's footwork, reads, timing, protection rules, chemistry, bad games, film sessions, and a ton of boring repetition. A headline that promises a superstar outcome skips all of that, because the boring truth doesn't get clicks. So when you see a Lamar-level comparison, or a Mahomes-level comparison, or any even better than line attached to a young QB, treat it like a flashing sign. Not that it's impossible, but that it's designed to spread faster than it's designed to educate. And once you accept that, the whole offseason starts to look different. You stop asking, is this true? And start asking, what reaction are they trying to pull out of me? Because the second you ask that, you can finally step out of the trap. And that's where this all lands, because if G. Bush is right, Browns fans don't just need a new quarterback plan. They need a new way to consume the coverage without getting played. Here's the uncomfortable truth G. Bush is really pointing at. Cleveland media doesn't have to beat you in an argument. They just have to keep you emotional. Because the second you're mad, you're engaged. You're clicking. You're sharing. You're quote tweeting. And the machine gets fed whether the take was smart or straight-up nonsense. That's why the Kyler versus Shedeur question matters. Not because it's the most important QB question on earth, but because it shows how easy it is to manufacture division with one sentence. You can turn a fanbase into a battlefield without providing a single useful detail about how the Browns actually win games. So if you want to spot rage bait before it hooks you, look for these tells. First, watch the wording. If a headline forces a false choice, right now today, would you rather? Is he already better than? It's usually designed to create a fight, not clarity. Real analysis starts with context. Rage bait starts with a verdict. Second, check the math. Anytime you see Browns should inquire about C.J. Stroud or any other franchise QB fantasy, ask the same thing G. Bush asked. With what picks? With what money? If the article doesn't even attempt to answer that, it's not reporting. It's entertainment dressed up as football. Third, be suspicious of random cut candidate lists with star names attached. If the argument is basically money, plus a vague line like, not as elite as he once was, you're looking at engagement farming. Cutting proven talent is a serious move with real consequences. Serious analysis explains the structure and the alternative plan. Clickbait just drops the grenade and waits. Fourth, pay attention to the Civil War angle. The moment the coverage shifts from football to relationship, locker room, divide, they don't like each other, and there's no clear sourcing, you're probably watching a narrative get built, not a reality get reported. And if it involves Watson, keep your head on straight. Accusations surfaced in the past, people have strong feelings, and that emotional charge makes it easier for bad actors to steer the conversation. Fifth, look for the upside comp trick. Lamar comparisons, even better than predictions. Next superstar framing. Those posts are built to travel, not to teach, not to set expectations. If it sounds like it was written to start a war in the replies, it probably was. And this is why the Browns QB conversation stays stuck. Not because fans are dumb, because fans are being targeted. Every offseason becomes a content harvest. Rumors, hypotheticals, impossible trades, and forced QB comparisons, while the real conversation gets ignored. Protection, weapons, coaching stability, the boring things that decide whether any quarterback succeeds. So here's the real question to leave with. If Shedeur is ever truly in the Browns' mix, whether it's real interest or just chatter, will Cleveland treat it like football or like a reality show? Drop in the comments, what's the most obvious rage bait headline you've seen this offseason? And what's one story you refuse to fall for?